History books love to tell us about the great civilizations of the past, the towering pyramids of Egypt, the mighty legions of Rome, the sprawling empires of China. But what if I told you those are just the tip of the iceberg? Beneath the surface of well-known history lies a hidden world of forgotten societies, cultures so extraordinary they defy belief, yet they've been erased from our collective memory. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on 25 ancient civilizations you never knew existed, societies that once thrived, innovated, and even rivaled the giants we celebrate today, only to vanish into the shadows of time. Picture this: vast cities buried under jungle canopies, kingdoms that mastered technology centuries ahead of their time, empires whose names have been whispered only in fragments of crumbling texts. These weren't just footnotes in history, they were powerhouses, visionaries, and pioneers whose legacies were swallowed by war, disaster, or the simple passage of time. And the most thrilling part, archaeologists are still uncovering their secrets piece by astonishing piece. This isn't just a journey through forgotten history, it's a rediscovery of humanity's lost chapters. Some of these civilizations built monuments that baffle modern engineers. Others developed social systems so advanced they put later societies to shame. A few even vanished so completely that we're still unraveling how they fell. So if you've ever felt like history class only told you half the story, buckle up. By the end of this, you'll see the ancient world in a whole new light. And trust me, what we're about to uncover will change the way you think about the past forever. Long before the Inca rose to power, another civilization was already shaping the Andes, one so ancient it makes the pyramids of Egypt look almost modern. Meet the Norte Chico, a society that flourished along the arid coast of Peru over 5,000 years ago. While most of the world was still grappling with basic agriculture, these people were building towering pyramids, sunken plazas, and sprawling ceremonial centers. The city of Caral, their crowning achievement, stands as one of the oldest urban centers in the Americas, a labyrinth of stone structures that echo with the whispers of a forgotten world. What makes the Norte Chico truly baffling isn't just their early mastery of architecture, it's what's missing from their story. Unlike nearly every other ancient culture, they left behind no pottery, no intricate carvings, no vivid murals. Archaeologists have sifted through their ruins for decades and found almost nothing in the way of visual art. How did a civilization so advanced leave so little of its inner life behind? Some believe their legacy was woven into textiles that decayed long ago. Others speculate that music, found in the form of haunting bone flutes, was their true medium of expression. Then there's the mystery of their survival. Nestled between the Pacific Ocean and the unforgiving desert, the Norte Chico somehow thrived without traditional farmland or irrigation systems. Instead, they relied on an intricate network of canals to divert water from seasonal rivers, turning barren land into fertile pockets of life. Even more surprising, there's no evidence they ever waged war. No weapons, no fortifications, just peaceful coexistence in a world where conflict was often the norm. The Norte Chico didn't just vanish, they faded, their influence seeping into later cultures like the Chavin and Moche, who may have inherited their architectural prowess and social ingenuity. But their greatest lesson might be this: civilization isn't defined by the artifacts it leaves behind, but by the ideas it sets in motion. And in the silent stones of Caral, those ideas still speak volumes. Deep in the forests of what is now Nigeria, a civilization was shaping metal and clay with breathtaking skill while Europe was still crawling out of the Dark Ages. The Nok people didn't just work with iron, they mastered it, smelting ore at temperatures that would have stunned their contemporaries. But what truly sets them apart are the eerie, larger-than-life terracotta sculptures they left behind, faces frozen in time, their hollow eyes staring back at us across 2,000 years. These weren't crude artifacts, they were sophisticated portraits, each one unique, with intricate hairstyles, elaborate jewelry, and expressions ranging from serenity to quiet sorrow. The Knox technological leap was staggering. By 500 years before the Common Era, they were producing carbon steel, a process Europe wouldn't perfect for another millennium. Their furnaces reached nearly 1500 degrees Celsius, hot enough to extract pure iron from stubborn ore. But here's the puzzle. Why did a culture so advanced in metallurgy choose to immortalize itself in fragile clay? Some scholars believe the sculptures served as ancestral guardians or ritual objects, perhaps tied to a belief system we can only guess at. Others suggest the terracotta figures were part of an elaborate funerary tradition meant to guide souls into the afterlife. Then, around 500 CE, the Knock vanished from the archaeological record. No invasion, no natural disaster explains their disappearance, just silence. One theory points to overexploitation of resources, as the massive fuel demands of their furnaces may have deforested the region. Another proposes that their society fragmented, their knowledge absorbed by later cultures like the Yoruba. But the most haunting possibility, that a single catastrophic event, a drought, a disease, wiped them out completely, leaving only those haunting clay faces as witnesses. The Knox legacy lingers in the most unexpected places. Modern metallurgists still study their techniques, while their sculptural style echoes in West African art to this day. Perhaps their greatest lesson is how fragile even the most advanced societies can be, and how art, not iron, may prove the most enduring mark of a civilization. While Europe's early farmers were still struggling with stone tools, a culture along the Danube River was quietly rewriting history's timeline. The Vinca people didn't just build settlements, they created one of the world's first proto-writing systems, scratching mysterious symbols onto clay tablets a full millennium before cuneiform emerged in Mesopotamia. These markings, found on everything from ritual objects to household pottery, aren't just random scratches, they form a recurring set of abstract signs that may represent the earliest attempt at recorded communication in human history. The sophistication of Vinca society would shock anyone who thinks of Neolithic cultures as primitive. Their villages boasted multi-room houses with specialized workshops, while their artisans produced copper axes and jewelry using metallurgy techniques far ahead of their time. But their most haunting creations are the stylized clay figurines, elongated figures with mask-like faces, some seated on thrones, others clutching sacred symbols. These weren't toys, they were likely ritual objects, perhaps depicting gods or ancestors in a spiritual tradition we can only begin to decipher. What makes the Vinca truly extraordinary is how much they achieved without outside influence. Unlike later civilizations that built upon trade networks, these innovations seem to have sprung up independently along the Balkan riverbanks. Their copper smelting predates the Bronze Age by centuries, while their ceramic kilns produced pottery rivaling anything from the ancient Near East. Even their homes reveal startling complexity. Some buildings show evidence of second stories and decorated facades, challenging our assumptions about Neolithic architecture. Then, around 4,500 years before the Common Era, their culture faded. Was it climate change, invasions, or simply the natural ebb and flow of prehistoric societies? The Vinca left no decipherable records to tell us just those enigmatic symbols and the lingering sense that we're glimpsing a pivotal moment when humanity first reached for something beyond survival. Their legacy whispers that civilization's beginnings may be older and far more mysterious than our textbooks ever suggested. Sandwiched between the mighty rivers of Mesopotamia and the rugged highlands of Persia, the Elamites carved out a civilization that refused to be overshadowed by its famous neighbors. While history books obsess over Babylon and Assyria, these masters of the Iranian plateau built ziggurats that rivaled Ur's grandeur, developed a script so unique it still isn't fully understood, and held their ground against wave after wave of invaders for nearly 3,000 years. Their capital, Susa, was no ordinary city. It was a cultural chameleon absorbing influences from Sumer to the west and the Indus Valley to the east while maintaining a fiercely independent identity. The Elamites didn't just copy Mesopotamian ziggurats, they reinvented them, constructing towering step temples with glazed brick facades that shimmered like lapis lazuli under the desert sun. Unlike their neighbors who wrote on clay tablets, they often inscribed royal decrees on silver and gold, as if declaring their words were too precious for common materials. Language became their ultimate act of defiance. While the rest of the ancient Near East adopted variants of cuneiform, the Elamites clung to their mysterious script, a blend of pictographs and syllables that modern linguists call Linear Elamite. Only a handful of these inscriptions have been found, each one a tantalizing piece of a puzzle we're still assembling. Some scholars believe their language wasn't even Indo-European or Semitic, but a linguistic isolate as unique as the Basque tongue is in Europe today. What's truly astonishing is how they survived when so many others fell. The Elamites endured invasions by Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians, each time bouncing back stronger. When the vengeful Assyrian king Ashurbanipal finally sacked Susa in 646 BCE, he boasted of destroying their ziggurats and sowing the earth with salt, yet within generations, Elamite culture resurfaced in the DNA of the rising Persian Empire. Their administrative systems became the backbone of Cyrus the Great's government, and their art influenced the reliefs at Persepolis. The Elamites didn't just resist history's tides, they redirected them. In their golden age, they controlled trade routes stretching from the Persian Gulf to the Afghan mountains, exchanging tin for Mesopotamian textiles and lapis lazuli for Indian ivory. Their metalworkers perfected techniques that would later define Persian craftsmanship, while their astronomers may have influenced Babylonian star charts. Even their decline holds a lesson: sometimes civilizations don't die, but dissolve into their successors like a river merging with the sea. High above the azure waters of the Aegean, a civilization thrived that defied every convention of the ancient world. The Minoans didn't just build palaces, they created labyrinths of light and color, where frescoes of leaping dolphins and bare-breasted priestesses whispered of a society utterly unlike their warlike neighbors. Knossos, their grandest palace, wasn't just a royal residence, it was a cosmological map, its winding corridors mirroring the constellations, its central courtyard aligned with the rising sun on solstice days. But beneath the artistry lies their greatest mystery, a culture where women seem to hold unprecedented power. Archaeologists have unearthed startling clues suggesting the Minoans may have been matriarchal, or at least matrifocal. Their art overwhelmingly showcases women in positions of authority, from snake-wielding goddesses towering over male worshippers to frescoes of female athletes vaulting over charging bulls. Even their religious rituals revolved around priestesses, not priests. The most provocative evidence comes from burial sites, where women were interred with lavish grave goods while male burials were comparatively modest. Could this explain why Minoan cities lacked defensive walls? Their society might have valued harmony over conquest, with leadership rooted in religious and economic roles rather than martial prowess. Then there's the Phaistos disc, a clay artifact that's become archaeology's ultimate enigma. Covered in spiraling symbols stamped with precision, it's the world's oldest known printed text, predating movable type by 3,000 years. But here's the catch: no one has ever cracked its code. Some believe it's a hymn, others a royal decree, or even an ancient board game. The symbols from helmeted heads to bees and ships appear nowhere else in Minoan art, making the disc either a foreign import or evidence of a lost script. Modern CT scans reveal something even more intriguing. The symbols weren't carved but pressed using individual seals, suggesting the Minoans might have invented printing millennia before Gutenberg. The Minoans' disappearance is wrapped in geological drama. Around 1600 BC, the volcanic island of Thera, modern Santorini, erupted with a force 50 times greater than Krakatoa. Tsunamis taller than 5-story buildings would have slammed into Crete's northern coast, while ash blotted out the sun for years. This catastrophe might have birthed the Atlantis legend. Plato's description of a sophisticated island kingdom vanishing beneath the waves eerily matches the Minoans' fate. But recent discoveries hint at a slower decline. Instead of being wiped out overnight, the Minoans may have clung on for generations, their trade networks crippled by the eruption, their palaces gradually abandoned to the vines. What lingers is their quiet revolution. The Minoans gave us Europe's first paved roads, flush toilets, and even a form of central heating. Their art celebrated nature's beauty rather than kingly conquests, and their maritime empire stretched from Spain to Egypt without leaving evidence of a single battlefield. In a world that equated civilization with swords and monuments, the Minoans chose dolphins over dynasties, and their whispers still echo in every myth about paradise lost. Imagine a land so lush, so abundant, that ancient Sumerians described it as the garden of the gods, a paradise where the sun granted immortality. This wasn't just myth. Nestled in the turquoise waters of the Persian Gulf, the civilization of Dilmun turned legend into reality. While Egypt was erecting pyramids and Mesopotamia was perfecting the wheel, Dilmun's merchants were quietly weaving a trade network that stretched from the Indus Valley to the cedar forests of Lebanon. Their secret, freshwater springs bubbling up from the ocean floor, transforming barren islands into emerald oases that became the ultimate Bronze Age pit stop. The scale of Dilmun's ambition is etched into Bahrain's landscape, literally. Over 120,000 burial mounds blanket the island, some towering as high as 3-story buildings. These aren't just simple graves, they're layered like an ancient onion with chambers inside chambers, suggesting generations of elites were buried together. The largest, known as the King's Mound, sprawls across nearly 50 acres, a necropolis rivaling Egypt's Valley of the Kings. But here's what baffles archaeologists: these tombs contained almost no weapons. Instead, they overflowed with pearls from the Gulf, ivory from Africa, and lapis lazuli from Afghanistan. Dilmun wasn't just a kingdom, it was the Costco of the ancient world. Now let's talk about Gilgamesh. In the world's oldest epic, the hero crosses poisonous waters to reach a mystical island where a sage reveals the secret of eternal life. Scholars have long suspected Dilmun was that very island. The parallels are uncanny. Sumerian texts describe Dilmun as a pure place where animals didn't harm each other and sickness didn't exist. Even more telling, excavations at their capital, Kalat al-Bahrain, uncovered a massive complex with a temple dedicated to Enki, the Sumerian god of wisdom, the same deity Gilgamesh sought for immortality. Coincidence or proof that Dilmun's real magic was its ability to become legend? What truly set Dilmun apart was its business acumen. While other empires conquered, they brokered. Their merchants invented the concept of trade tariffs, taxing goods that passed through their ports. They didn't just sell dates and pearls, they standardized weights and measures, creating Bronze Age versions of barcodes to streamline transactions. Cuneiform receipts found in Mesopotamia record shipments of Dilmun copper. But here's the twist: Bahrain has no copper mines. The metal likely came from Oman, rebranded as Dilmun made to fetch premium prices. This wasn't just trade, it was ancient branding genius. Then, around 500 BC, the taps ran dry literally. Geological studies showed Dilmun's life-giving springs began failing as sea levels rose. Without fresh water, the gardens of paradise withered, but their legacy didn't. The burial mounds became navigational markers for sailors, while their trade routes evolved into the incense trails of later empires. Even their name survives. Bahrain's modern Tree of Life, a lone mesquite thriving in the desert, echoes the immortal gardens of Sumerian verse, Dilmun's greatest lesson. Sometimes the mightiest civilizations aren't those that wield swords, but those who turn scarcity into opportunity and in doing so become the stuff of legends. Beneath the fertile plains of modern Pakistan and India lies one of history's most enigmatic urban experiments, the Harappan civilization. While Egypt and Mesopotamia built pyramids and ziggurats, these masters of the Indus Valley engineered cities with a precision that would make modern urban planners envious. Wide, grid-patterned streets, standardized brick sizes, and a sewage system so advanced it wouldn't be matched until the Roman era, all hallmarks of a society that prioritized function over flash. But the real mystery, unlike their contemporaries, the Harappans left no grand temples, no towering statues of kings, no battle scenes carved into stone. Just who or what held this remarkably egalitarian civilization together? Take Mohenjo-Daro, their crown jewel. Archaeologists estimate the city's population may have reached 40,000 at its peak, yet not a single weapon has been found in its ruins. No depictions of conquest, no fortified walls, just an abundance of children's toys, intricate jewelry, and artifacts suggesting a culture obsessed with trade and craftsmanship. Even more baffling is their water management system. Nearly every house had a private bathing area connected to a citywide drainage network, with manholes for maintenance technology that wouldn't reappear in Europe for another 4,000 years. This wasn't just infrastructure, it was a philosophy, one that treated clean water as a universal right rather than a privilege for elites. Then there's the script. Over 4,000 inscribed seals and tablets have been discovered, covered in a graceful, fishbone-like writing system that stubbornly resists decoding. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs or Mesopotamian cuneiform, Harappan symbols are frustratingly brief. Most inscriptions contain just 5 or 6 characters. Some scholars argue it's not even a true writing system, but a complex set of merchants' marks or religious symbols. Others point to computer analyzers showing statistical patterns consistent with language, suggesting we might be looking at the world's first business receipts or bureaucratic records. The truth, without a Rosetta Stone equivalent, the Harappans' voices remain tantalizingly out of reach. What truly sets them apart is their apparent rejection of hierarchy. Excavations reveal strikingly uniform houses with no evidence of palaces or slums. Their art depicts dancers, trees, and mythical beasts, but no clear rulers or warrior elites. Even their weights and measures were standardized across an area larger than ancient Egypt, hinting at a centralized authority more concerned with fairness than dominance. Some theorize they were governed by priestly oligarchies or merchant guilds, while others propose a form of early democracy, the most radical idea that they thrived without any government at all, bound instead by shared cultural norms and mutual benefit. Their disappearance is as cryptic as their rise. Around 1900 BC, the great cities began emptying out. Not to invasion, there's no evidence of violence, but to something subtler. Climate data suggests the mighty Saraswati River, their lifeblood, may have dried up due to tectonic shifts. Trade routes faltered as Mesopotamia collapsed into chaos. Yet even in decline, the Harappans adapted rather than fought, scattering into smaller villages and passing their legacy to later cultures. Today, their echoes linger in Hindu water rituals, in the bizarre economies of South Asia, and most of all, in the unanswered question at civilization's heart: must progress always come with kings and conquests, or is there another path? Along the sun-baked plains where Central Asia bleeds into Afghanistan, a forgotten empire once thrived in the shadow of the Hindu Kush. The Oxus civilization, also known as Bactria Margiana, didn't just survive in this harsh landscape, it flourished, erecting fortress cities with walls thick enough to defy sieges and crafting gold jewelry so delicate modern artisans struggle to replicate their techniques. While Egypt's pharaohs obsessed over the afterlife and Mesopotamia's kings waged endless wars, these master traders turned the Amu Darya River into a liquid highway for lapis lazuli, tin, and turquoise, building wealth that glittered across the Bronze Age world. Their strongholds tell a story of paranoia and prestige. Cities like Ghana Tepe weren't just settlements, they were concentric rings of defense with towering outer walls guarding elite districts where goldsmiths worked their magic. Excavations reveal something startling. These weren't merely military fortifications but social barriers. The innermost compounds held palaces with columned halls and elaborate drainage systems, while outer rings housed craftsmen in standardized mud brick homes. This wasn't just urban planning, it was Bronze Age class stratification carved in clay and stone. Then there's the gold. Oxus artisans produced armbands thinner than a credit card yet strong enough to withstand daily wear, depicting mythical griffins with feathers individually etched. Their signature technique, granulation, involved fusing microscopic gold beads onto surfaces without visible solder, a method so complex some scholars believe the recipe was lost for millennia. Most haunting are the Oxus chariots, tiny gold models showing horse-drawn vehicles manned by driver and archer, possibly representing a warrior elite whose real counterparts vanished without a trace. What sealed their fate? Climate cores from nearby lakes paint a grim picture. Around 1800 BCE, the rivers that fed their fields began shrinking as glaciers retreated in the Pamir Mountains. But this wasn't just an environmental collapse, it was a perfect storm. Trade routes faltered as Mesopotamia descended into chaos, while nomads from the steppes exploited weakening defenses. Yet the Oxus people didn't just surrender. At sites like Togalok, archaeologists found evidence of last-ditch efforts, makeshift repairs to crumbling walls, wells dug deeper as water tables dropped, even ritual deposits of precious objects pleading for divine intervention. Their legacy hides in plain sight. The Persian Empire's famed goldwork likely descended from Oxus techniques, while their fortress blueprints echo in medieval Central Asian citadels. Some linguists even trace elements of the Avestan language, the tongue of Zoroastrian scriptures, back to these vanished cities. Perhaps their greatest lesson is that no amount of gold can buy immunity from a changing world, but even in collapse, civilizations plant seeds that outlive them. While most ancient kingdoms measured power in territory and armies, Korea's Silla dynasty forged an empire that shimmered, literally. Beneath the sacred burial mounds of Gyeongju lies a revelation, tombs like Chunmachong, the heavenly horse chamber, where gold crowns drip with jade pendants so finely crafted they chime like wind bells when touched. These weren't just royal ornaments, they were cosmic maps, their branching designs mimicking sacred trees believed to connect Earth to the heavens. But don't let the delicate artistry fool you. Silla's glittering surface masked a military machine that unified Korea's warring kingdoms through equal parts diplomacy and ruthless strategy. The Hwarang weren't your typical warrior class. These elite young men trained in poetry and Buddhism as rigorously as swordsmanship, following a code called Seokbyoljai that blended chivalry with spiritual enlightenment. Contemporary texts describe them studying under waterfalls to master discipline, composing verses about cherry blossoms before battle, and wearing makeup into combat to intimidate foes. Their dual identity, part philosopher, part lethal enforcer, became Silla's secret weapon. While rival kingdoms relied on brute force, the Hwarang's cultural sophistication let them negotiate alliances even as they systematically conquered their neighbors. What's staggering is how Silla's golden age was bankrolled. Their tombs reveal thousands of gold artifacts, yet Korea has no natural gold deposits. Archaeologists trace the metal to trade networks stretching to Siberia and Persia, proving Silla wasn't some isolated kingdom but a global player. Their artisans didn't just copy foreign styles, they reinvented them, like the iconic Tree of Life crowns fusing steppe nomad designs with distinctly Korean symbolism. Even their glassware tells a story of connections, with Roman-style mosaic beads appearing alongside locally invented gold granulation techniques, But here's the twist: Scylla's golden treasures nearly caused their downfall. As wealth concentrated among nobles, peasant revolts simmered. The same Hwarang who unified Korea later fractured into factions, their idealism corroded by power struggles. Yet in their twilight, Scylla made one last enduring contribution: the world's oldest surviving astronomical observatory. Cheomseongdi's bottle-shaped tower wasn't just for stargazing. Its 365 stones mirrored the days of the year, while windows aligned with solstices. It's a fitting legacy for a civilization that balanced martial might with celestial wonder, proving even empires built on gold must ultimately answer to the stars. High in the misty Andes, where clouds cling to mountains like ghosts, the Chachapoya built a civilization that defied both nature and history. Known as the Cloud Warriors, these enigmatic people constructed their cities on sheer cliffs, carving sarcophagi into vertical rock faces that stare across valleys like silent sentinels. Unlike the stone block precision of the Inca, Chachapoya architecture embraced curves, round forts with concentric walls snaking along ridge tops, their designs echoing the rolling clouds that gave these warriors their name. But their most haunting legacy: hundreds of pure-and-matches colorful, human-shaped burial pods tucked into impossible cliffsides, their painted faces watching over remains so well preserved by the cool altitude that skin and hair survive after centuries. The truth about these warriors shatters romantic myths. Early Spanish chroniclers described them as tall, fair-skinned people, claims that fueled wild theories about European or even Phoenician origins. Modern DNA tells a different story. The Chachapoya were indigenous Andeans, their light complexion likely evolved from generations in fog-shrouded highlands. Their real distinction wasn't race but resistance. When the Inca Empire expanded in the 15th century, these mountain dwellers held out for decades, using their cliffside strongholds like the sprawling Cuelap fortress, a citadel with walls 60 feet tall enclosing 400 buildings. The Inca ultimately conquered them, but not before the Chachapoya extracted a unique concession. Their warriors became elite units in the imperial army, valued for their ferocity in battle. Archaeologists are still piecing together how this culture functioned. Their settlements reveal no evidence of kings or centralized rule, just clusters of circular homes suggesting cooperative communities. Pottery shards depict warriors with distinctive facial paint, possibly marking different clans or ranks. Most intriguing are their textiles, woven with geometric patterns that may have served as a visual language long before the Inca's quipu system. Unlike coastal cultures that worshipped the sea, the Chachapoya revered jaguars and eagles, symbols of power that still appear in modern Amazonian shamanism, hinting at cultural connections lost to time. The Inca conquest wasn't the end but a transformation. Chachapoya masons helped build Machu Picchu, their curved architectural style blending with Inca precision. Their warriors became bodyguards for emperors, while their women entered imperial courts as prized weavers. Yet when Spanish chronicles mention the Chachapoya's demise, they describe something startling: entire communities vanishing into the cloud forests rather than submit to foreign rule. Today, their descendants may still walk the Andes, keepers of stories about warriors who chose to disappear into the mist rather than surrender their identity to history's march. Buried beneath the rugged highlands of modern Turkey lies evidence of a civilization that changed warfare forever. The Hittites didn't just discover iron, they weaponized it. While most Bronze Age armies clashed with copper and bronze, these masters of Anatolia were forging weapons so strong they seemed supernatural to their enemies. Their capital, Hattusa, wasn't just a city, it was a sprawling fortress of cyclopean walls and secret tunnels, its gates flanked by towering stone lions daring invaders to approach. Yet for all their military might, the Hittites' greatest legacy might be something far more unexpected. History's first recorded peace treaty, etched onto a silver tablet after their earth-shaking clash with Egypt's pharaoh Ramses II. The Battle of Kadesh wasn't just another ancient skirmish, it was the Bronze Age equivalent of two superpowers colliding. In 1274 BCE, nearly 6,000 chariots thundered across the Orontes River in what remains one of the largest chariot battles ever fought. Ramses boasted of crushing the Hittites, but the truth was far messier. Hittite King Muwatalli Roman II tactics, including a brilliant ambush using hidden infantry, nearly annihilated the Egyptian forces. Both sides ultimately claimed victory, but the real winner was diplomacy. The ensuing peace treaty, preserved in both Egyptian hieroglyphs and Hittite cuneiform, didn't just end hostilities. It established prisoner repatriation, mutual defense pacts, and even extradition clauses, proving these weren't just barbarians with iron swords but sophisticated statesmen. What truly set the Hittites apart was their industrial revolution. While others viewed iron as a curiosity, they perfected furnaces hot enough to smelt it efficiently, creating weapons that could slash through bronze armor like parchment. Their metallurgists guarded these techniques so fiercely that when their empire collapsed, ironworking knowledge temporarily regressed across the Mediterranean. But their innovations didn't stop at warfare. Hattusha's archives reveal thousands of clay tablets detailing everything from constitutional law to medical treatments. One startling text describes using magnetite to draw sickness from the body, an early form of magnetism therapy. Then came the collapse. Around 1200 BC, Hattusha was abruptly abandoned, food still stored in jars, valuables left untouched. The usual suspects, invaders, drought, don't fully explain the speed of their demise. New research points to a perfect storm. Climate shifts causing crop failures, rebellions among subject states, and perhaps most critically, an over-reliance on centralized grain distribution. When trade networks fractured during the wider Bronze Age collapse, the Hittite heartland starved within months. Yet their influence endured. The Bible mentions Hittite mercenaries centuries after their empire's fall, while their legal concepts filtered into Assyrian and later Roman law. Even their language survived. Modern words like Hittite and Koti stem from their self-given name, Nesili. The Hittites teach us that empires aren't undone by weakness alone, but by inflexibility, and that sometimes the most enduring monuments aren't temples or palaces, but ideas cast in iron and sealed with silver. When Egypt's new kingdom crumbled, a power rose from the southern deserts that would rewrite history. The kingdom of Kush didn't just trade with Egypt, they conquered it. While most imagine ancient Nubia as Egypt's lesser neighbor, the Kushites built a civilization so formidable they ruled the Nile as pharaohs of the 25th dynasty, adorning temples from Thebes to Memphis with their distinctive double cobra crowns. But their true masterpiece lay further south, the pyramids of Meroe, where steep-sided tombs stabbed the sky like defiant blades, outnumbering Egypt's own and revealing a culture that refused to live in anyone's shadow. What made the Kushites extraordinary wasn't just their military might, it was their industrial genius. While Rome was still a muddy village, Kush's furnaces blazed day and night, producing iron on an industrial scale. The ruins of Meroe reveal slag heaps towering over 30 feet high, evidence of smelters that may have birthed Africa's first industrial revolution. Their secret, the Meroe blast furnace, a wind-catching design that harnessed seasonal gales to superheat ore without bellows technology, so advanced it wouldn't be matched until medieval Europe. These weren't just blacksmiths, they were metallurgical sorcerers, forging weapons and tools that circulated across the continent while Europe languished in the Iron Age's infancy. The Kushite pyramids tell a story of cultural defiance. Unlike Egypt's smooth-sided monuments, Meroe's tombs angle dramatically at 70 degrees, their cramped burial chambers favoring intimate ceremonies over grand processions. Wall carvings show queens smiting enemies alongside kings, a radical departure from Egyptian gender norms. Even their writing system rebelled, replacing hieroglyphs with a unique cursive script we've only partially deciphered. One tantalizing tablet appears to record a Kushite queen's trade negotiations with Chinese envoys, hinting at connections spanning continents. Yet their greatest legacy might be their last stand. When Roman Emperor Augustus demanded tribute, Kushite warriors responded by sacking a swan and decapitating bronze statues of Caesar. The ensuing war saw Rome's legions decimated by heat and guerrilla tactics. Pliny the Elder wrote of black-skinned giants whose arrows carried poisons unknown to Mediterranean physicians. Though they eventually made peace, the Kushites proved something revolutionary. Africa could not just resist empires but humble them. Today, the sands whisper their epilogue. Meroe's last rulers converted to Christianity, their churches rising beside pagan temples before drought and shifting trade routes silenced the forges forever. But in Sudan's oral traditions, the name Kush still echoes, not as Egypt's pupil, but as the civilization that taught iron to speak, and in doing so, forged Africa's defiant soul. Hidden beneath the jungles of Veracruz, the Olmec didn't just carve giant stone heads, they laid the foundation for every great Mesoamerican civilization to follow. Those iconic colossal heads, some weighing over 20 tons, aren't just artistic marvels, they're political statements. Each one a portrait of a ruler so powerful he commanded the labor to haul basalt boulders from mountains 50 miles away. But the Olmec's true genius lies in what they left behind when their cities vanished. Ideas so potent they shaped the Maya, the Aztecs, and beyond. Take the Mesoamerican ball game, a sport so much more than a sport. The oldest known ball court wasn't built by the Maya or Aztecs, but discovered at the Olmec site of El Manote, where rubber balls were ritually deposited in sacred springs. This wasn't just recreation, it was cosmic theater. Players became living symbols of celestial bodies, their hip-driven shots mirroring the sun's journey across the sky. The stakes, some scholars believe high-ranking losers faced ritual sacrifice, their blood fertilizing the earth like sacred rain. The Olmec may have even pioneered the game's signature equipment, rubber balls made from latex mixed with morning glory vine juice, creating bouncy spheres that amazed early Spanish chroniclers. Then there's their writing system, or rather, the tantalizing hints of one. A cylindrical seal from the Olmec heartland bears glyph-like symbols dating to around 650 BCE, predating Maya script by centuries. While it's too brief to decipher, the implication is staggering. The Olmec might have been the first in the Americas to capture language in symbols. Their influence ripples through later Mesoamerican scripts, the Maya's dot and bar numerals, and even their concept of zero may trace back to Olmec prototypes found on carved jade celts and stelae. But perhaps their most enduring export was the very idea of cities. At La Venta, they engineered the first planned urban center in Mesoamerica, with a ceremonial core aligned to magnetic north and an artificial mound shaped like a flaming bird, possibly a prototype for the pyramids of Teotihuacan. Their cosmology permeates later cultures too. The feathered serpent deity worshipped by the Aztecs as Quetzalcoatl first slithered from Olmec iconography, while their jaguar god motifs became the Maya's obsession with shape-shifting rulers. The Olmec collapse around 400 BC remains one of archaeology's great whodunits. Some blame volcanic eruptions that choked rivers with ash, others point to civil unrest hinted at by defaced monuments. But their disappearance was an illusion. Their ideas had already taken root across Mesoamerica, waiting to blossom in cultures that never knew their name. Those silent stone heads still guard the secret. True immortality isn't carved in rock, but in the minds of those who inherit your dreams. In the windswept valleys between Persia and China, the Sogdians turned trade into an art form. While empires rose and fell around them, these master merchants of the Silk Road built a civilization not on conquest but on connection, their caravans becoming the internet of the ancient world, transmitting goods, ideas, and even religions across continents. Their capital, Samarkand, wasn't just a city, it was a kaleidoscope of cultures where Zoroastrian fire temples stood beside Buddhist stupas, and Nestorian Christian churches neighbored bustling markets filled with Chinese silk and Baltic amber. What set the Sogdians apart was their linguistic genius. Multilingual from childhood, they served as translators, diplomats, and spies, whispering in the ears of Turkic Khans one day and Tang dynasty emperors the next. Their letters, discovered in the ruins of a frontier garrison, reveal a network stretching from Byzantium to Kyoto, filled with business advice, family gossip, and even complaints about slow-paying customers. One remarkably preserved note from a Sogdian woman named Mune pleads with her absent husband to send money home, her ink-stained words bridging 14 centuries with their raw humanity. Their role in spreading Buddhism defies stereotypes. While often depicted as profit-driven middlemen, Sogdian merchants became accidental missionaries, commissioning cave temples along trade routes from Dunhuang to Bamiyan. The most stunning examples survive in Panjakant's murals, where blue-eyed Buddhas sit cross-legged beside deities wearing Sogdian robes, a visual fusion of Indian spirituality and Central Asian aesthetics. These weren't just acts of piety, they were marketing. By providing spiritual infrastructure along the Silk Road, the Sogdians ensured travelers, and their wealth kept flowing through their territory. All this unraveled with terrifying speed. When Arab armies surged eastward in the 8th century, they encountered something unexpected, a people who fought as fiercely as they traded. At the siege of Mount Mug, a Sogdian prince named Divashtich made his last stand in a mountain fortress, his final letters still pleading for reinforcements that never came. The victorious Arabs preserved records of his treasury silver vessels, sacks of musk, and boxes of dragon's blood resin, but erased something far more precious. Within generations, the vibrant Zoroastrian Buddhist synthesis that defined Sogdian culture was overwritten by Islam, their unique script replaced by Arabic, their fire temples crumbling into oblivion. Yet traces linger. Modern Tajiks still speak a descendant of the Sogdian language, while their merchant diaspora in China became the ancestors of important Tang dynasty clans. Even the word paradise comes from their walled gardens, the paradisa that inspired Persian and later European visions of Eden. The Sogdians remind us that history's greatest connectors often leave faint footprints, not in monuments or conquests, but in the invisible threads that once bound the world together. Long before Rome became an empire, the hills of central Italy belonged to a people who baffled both their contemporaries and modern historians, the Etruscans. While history remembers them as the civilization that taught Rome everything from architecture to augury, their origins remain one of Europe's great mysteries. Ancient scholars like Herodotus claimed they sailed from Lydia in Anatolia, while modern DNA studies reveal a different story. Their genes match local Iron Age populations, suggesting they weren't outsiders at all, but indigenous Italians who developed a culture so distinct it seemed foreign even to their neighbors. The Etruscan language offers tantalizing clues to their uniqueness. Unlike Latin or Greek, their script, borrowed from Greek traders but used to write an entirely unrelated tongue, remains only partially deciphered. Thousands of inscriptions survive, from temple dedications to bawdy banquet graffiti, yet without a bilingual Rosetta Stone, much of their literature is lost. What we can read reveals a society obsessed with destiny. Their bronze liver models, used to train priests in divination, map the cosmos onto organ anatomy, showing how they believed the gods spoke through every ripple and spot. This wasn't superstition, it was a sophisticated system that would shape Roman state religion for centuries. Speaking of Rome, the Eternal City's debt to the Etruscans is staggering. Those iconic gladiatorial games the Romans made infamous, originally an Etruscan funeral rite called munera, where captive warriors fought to honor the dead. The Romans even borrowed their togas, originally Etruscan, tebina cloaks, and the very symbol of Rome's power, the fasces, those bundles of rods and axes carried by magistrates. Even Rome's legendary founding owes them a debt. The city's first kings were Etruscan rulers like Tarquinius Priscus, who drained the malarial marshes to build the Forum and introduced sewer systems that made urban life possible. Their cities defied convention too. Unlike Greek colonies with their rigid grids, Etruscan metropolises like Cervatory sprawled organically, mirroring the landscape. Their necropolises, cities of the dead, were laid out like mirror images of living towns, complete with streets and stone houses. Inside these tombs, frescoes burst with color, showing banquets where men and women reclined together as equals, a custom that shocked conservative Greeks. Etruscan women enjoyed freedoms unheard of elsewhere. They owned property, attended public events, and even passed their family names to children, a practice that made Roman traditionalists clutch their togas in horror. Yet by the 3rd century BC, their civilization was unraveling, not with a dramatic conquest but through slow assimilation. As Rome grew stronger, Etruscan cities either allied with the rising power or fell one by one. Surprisingly, many Etruscan elites thrived under Roman rule. Seneca wrote of wealthy Etruscan families still practicing their ancient rites generations after losing independence. Their language faded last in remote mountain towns, lingering like an echo until the early imperial era when even Emperor Claudius, who compiled an Etruscan dictionary now lost, couldn't stop its slide into oblivion. The irony: Rome swallowed the Etruscans whole, yet became their greatest monument, that iconic she-wolf statue symbolizing Rome's founding, Etruscan craftsmanship. The arches that later upheld Roman aqueducts perfected by Etruscan engineers. Even the concept of empire itself may trace back to their League of 12 city-states, a prototype for Rome's later dominion. The Etruscans didn't disappear. They became the invisible scaffolding upon which Rome built its glory, proving some civilizations achieve immortality not through conquest, but by becoming the foundation others stand upon. Beneath the blistering sands of the Sahara lies evidence of an empire that turned the world's harshest desert into a thriving oasis. The Garamantes didn't just survive where others saw only death. They built a civilization that mastered water itself. While ancient Egypt relied on the predictable Nile, these desert engineers tapped into an invisible resource: subterranean rivers flowing beneath the dunes. Their ingenious fagaras, a network of underground tunnels stretching over 600 miles, channeled water from deep aquifers to fields and cities, creating a green ribbon of life in the Libyan desert. These weren't just ditches, they were feats of precision engineering, with vertical shafts dug every 100 feet to allow maintenance and airflow, some descending over 100 feet into the earth. Gold and human misery fueled their rise. The Garamantes became the middlemen of the trans-Saharan slave trade, capturing sub-Saharan Africans and selling them to Mediterranean markets. Roman writers like Pliny the Elder described their chariots pulled by 4 horses abreast, raiding southward across dunes that outsiders believed impassable. But their real wealth came from controlling the desert's hidden gold routes. Garamonte middlemen connected West African goldfields to Berber and Phoenician traders, their caravans following paths marked by stone cairns that still stand today. Recent satellite imagery has revealed lost settlements along these routes, suggesting an empire far more extensive than historians once believed. Their capital, Garama, was a marvel of desert adaptation. Multi-story mud brick towers rose above palm groves irrigated by the fagaras, while public baths fed by the same underground channels offered respite from the heat. Archaeologists have uncovered glassware from Italy, beads from India, and even Chinese silk fragments in Garamonte tombs, proving their reach spanned continents. Yet their most startling innovation might be their written language, an early form of Tifinagh script carved onto rocks throughout the desert, still used today by the Tuareg people who may be their descendants. The Garamontes' downfall came not from war but from their own success. Centuries of relentless water extraction dropped the aquifer beyond recovery, while overgrazing turned marginal lands to dust. By the 5th century, their fagaras ran dry and the desert reclaimed its dominion. But their legacy whispers in the wind. Modern Tuareg still maintain sections of ancient fagara tunnels, and the very word Sahara may derive from their name. They remind us that even in Earth's most unforgiving corners, human ingenuity can bloom, but never without consequence. Where the Mekong River spills into the South China Sea, a kingdom rose from the swamp that changed Southeast Asia forever. The Funan didn't just adapt to water, they worshipped it. Their cities weren't built on land but woven through it, with canals serving as streets and houses perched on stilts above crocodile-infested marshes. While Europe was collapsing into the Dark Ages, these masters of monsoon trade created a Hindu-Buddhist fusion civilization that became the blueprint for later powers like the Khmer Empire. The key to their success lay in turning geography into destiny. Funan's capital, Viadhapura, wasn't just a city, it was a hydraulic wonder with moats wide enough for warships and locks controlling tidal flows. Chinese envoys described palaces glittering with gold tiles, where Brahmin priests chanted Sanskrit hymns beside Buddhist monks. But what truly stunned outsiders were their warehouses, stacked to the ceilings with Roman glass, Persian carpets, and Chinese silks, all taxed and logged by clerks using Indian accounting systems. Funan's spiritual blend was as fluid as its waterways. Archaeologists have uncovered lingams, Hindu phallic symbols of Shiva, carved alongside footprints of the Buddha in the same temples. Their gold coins bore the image of the sun god Surya on one side and the lotus throne of Avalokiteshvara on the other. This wasn't just tolerance, it was alchemy, transforming foreign faiths into something uniquely Southeast Asian. Then there's the mystery of their origins. Legend claims an Indian Brahmin named Kondinya married the local Naga princess, a serpentine water deity, symbolizing the fusion of Indian ideas with indigenous animism. Genetic studies reveal a startling truth. Funan's elite did carry South Asian ancestry, suggesting high-status migration rather than conquest. Their Sanskrit inscriptions mix with Khmer words like ingredients in a cultural stew, proving hybridization went both ways. The Funan collapse reads like an environmental parable. Around 6th century CE, their canals began silting up as monsoon patterns shifted. Rising sea levels turned freshwater rivers brackish, poisoning rice paddies. But their legacy didn't drown, it floated inland, carried by refugees who seeded the ideas that would later build Angkor Wat. Even today, Cambodian fishermen still whisper prayers to the Naga princess, keeping alive the memory of a kingdom that proved civilizations can rise from swamps and leave ripples across millennia. Buried beneath the shifting sands of China's Taklamakan Desert lies a mystery that rewrites our understanding of the ancient world. The Tarim mummies, these remarkably preserved corpses with their striking European features, flowing blonde or red hair, and intricate woven woolens, seem utterly out of place in the heart of Asia. Dating back as early as 1800 BC, they challenge everything we thought we knew about early cultural exchange. The mummies' clothing alone is a revelation: twilled fabrics in vibrant plaids resembling Celtic tartans, felted boots lined with intricate geometric patterns, and even finely woven baskets that could pass for Neolithic European crafts. How did these distinctly Caucasian people end up thousands of miles from their genetic homeland? And what happened to their forgotten culture? The key to their identity might lie in their language. Scraps of writing found in nearby ruins belong to Tocharian, an Indo-European tongue closer to ancient Celtic and Latin than to any Asian language. Imagine the scene: merchants speaking a language akin to Homer's Greek, bartering with Chinese officials along the Silk Road centuries before it supposedly opened. These weren't just wandering nomads, they built sophisticated settlements like the oasis city of Kroren, where archaeologists uncovered wooden columns carved with cherubs resembling Hellenistic art, alongside Chinese lacquerware and Persian textiles. Their cemeteries reveal even more surprises: tall, narrow boats buried with the dead, possibly representing vessels to ferry souls to the afterlife, a practice echoing Viking burials half a world away. What's truly baffling is how they lived in harmony with their environment. Unlike later Silk Road travelers who clung to riverbanks, the Tarim people thrived in the desert's dead heart by tapping into underground glacial runoff. Their burial sites, now surrounded by barren wasteland, were once lush groves of poplar trees. Some mummies still clutch sprigs of ephedra, a medicinal plant that may have been their secret to surviving the harsh climate. Even their makeup tells a story of cultural fusion. One famously preserved Beauty of Lulan mummy wears eyeliner made of powdered azurite, a technique familiar to both ancient Egyptians and Chinese nobility. Theories about their origins read like an epic saga. Some suggest they were remnants of Alexander the Great's lost armies, though their timeline predates him by a millennium. Others propose they descended from migratory Proto-Indo-Europeans who split off from their Western cousins, trekking eastward instead of into Europe. But the most compelling evidence comes from their DNA genetic studies, show startling connections not just to Europeans, but to ancient Siberian and even Native American populations, hinting at a vast, interconnected Bronze Age world we're only beginning to map. Their disappearance is as enigmatic as their arrival. By the time the Han Dynasty chronicles mention fair-haired barbarians in the Tarim Basin, their distinct culture was already fading, absorbed by incoming Turkic and Mongolic peoples. Yet their legacy lingers in whispers. Modern Aika folklore still speaks of red-haired giants who once ruled the desert, and fragments of Tocharian survived in Buddhist monastery texts until the 9th century. The Tarim mummies force us to confront a radical idea, that the crossroads of civilization weren't just between East and West, but part of a lost global network where cultures mixed and migrated in ways we're only now uncovering. Their silent, sandblasted faces remind us that history is never as simple as the maps in our textbooks sometimes. It's written in genes and textiles rather than ink and stone. High in the mist-shrouded mountains of northern Colombia, the Tairona built a civilization that defied both gravity and conquest. Their stone-paved roads weren't just pathways. They were engineering marvels, snaking up near vertical slopes with staircases carved directly into bedrock and drainage systems so precise they still function 500 years later. These weren't simple dirt trails but elevated causeways wide enough for ceremonial processions, connecting terraced cities that clung to the mountainsides like swallows' nests. The Spanish called them the stairway builders, but that barely scratches the surface of what they achieved. Gold flowed through Tairona society like water through their mountain streams. Unlike the Incas' massive golden displays, the Tairona worked on an intimate scale, tiny pendants depicting bats with outstretched wings, nose rings shaped like jaguar fangs, and breastplates so thin they shimmered like liquid sunlight. Their tumbaga alloys, a mix of gold and copper, created objects that could be hardened like steel yet retained the brilliance of precious metal. Most haunting are their paporos, lime containers used in coca rituals, shaped with such anatomical precision that modern metallurgists still debate how they achieved such flawless joins without modern tools. What makes their downfall even more tragic is how close they came to surviving. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in 1524, the Tairona didn't collapse immediately. They retreated higher into the Sierra Nevada, abandoning coastal cities but fortifying mountaintop strongholds. For nearly a century, they waged a guerrilla war from their cloud forest citadels, using their intricate road network to launch surprise attacks before vanishing into the mist. Spanish documents from 1599 describe soldiers finding empty villages where food still cooked over fires, the inhabitants having melted into the forest moments before. The real killer wasn't swords but silence. With no immunity to European diseases, the Tairona were decimated by waves of smallpox and measles. Their terraces were swallowed by jungle so completely that when archaeologists rediscovered Ciudad Perdida in the 1970s, local indigenous guides insisted no such city existed until stone circles emerged beneath their machetes. Today, their descendants, the Kogi, Wiwa, and Ahuoko, still guard their ancestors' wisdom, warning that the Tarona's fate was not just tragedy but prophecy, a warning about what happens when balance with nature is broken. Perhaps their most enduring lesson lies in those overgrown roads. Though the Spanish thought they'd erased the Tarona, their stonework endures not as ruins but as living infrastructure. Modern trekkers following ancient routes still find sections where the stones fit so tightly that not even a blade of grass can wedge between them. The Tarona may have fallen, but their mountains remember. Centuries before modern cargo ships choked the waters of Southeast Asia, an invisible empire ruled the waves not from grand palaces on land, but from fleets of wooden ships that rarely touched shore. The Srivijaya of Sumatra didn't just control trade, they mastered the art of projection without permanence, building a thalassocracy, a maritime empire that dominated the Malacca Strait for over 600 years. This narrow passage between Sumatra and Malaysia was the ancient world's busiest shipping lane, the choke point where spices from the Moluccas, silks from China, and gems from India all converged. Srivijaya's secret: they didn't need to build sprawling cities when they could tax every vessel that passed through the watery crossroads of the world. At their height around the 8th century, Srivijayan ships ranged from mosquito-like patrol boats enforcing tolls to massive junks capable of hauling 300 tons of cargo. Chinese Buddhist pilgrim Yijing wrote of stopping at their bustling port cities, where merchants haggled in a dozen languages and gold flowed like monsoon rain. But what's astonishing isn't just their reach, it's how little they left behind. Unlike the Khmer with Angkor Wat or the Javanese with Borobudur, Srivijaya's heart was its navy, leaving archaeologists grasping at whispers. Their capital shifted with the tide, sometimes Palembang on Sumatra's muddy Musi River, other times Jam by farther north, each more a logistical hub than a ceremonial center. The few physical clues we have paint a picture of ruthless efficiency. Inscriptions on surviving stone pillars boast of Srivijayan kings commanding hundreds of warships to crush rebellious ports. A single surviving document, the Kejukun Bukit inscription, hints at their origin story, describing a 7th century military expedition that supposedly united Sumatran river mouths under one banner. Their real power lay in psychology. By controlling freshwater supplies along the strait's coasts, they forced passing ships to stop and pay, or risk dying of thirst on the next leg of their journey. Buddhism became their soft power tool. While enforcing brutal trade monopolies, Srivijaya's rulers patronized massive monasteries that attracted scholars from across Asia. The great Buddhist university at Nalanda in India even maintained a special dormitory for Srivijayan students. This wasn't just piety, it was networking on a continental scale, creating loyalties that smoothed trade negotiations from Bengal to Canton. Their most lasting cultural export might be the Malay language, which spread as the region's lingua franca through Srivijayan merchant networks, eventually evolving into modern Indonesian and Malaysian. Then, around the 13th century, they simply dissolved. No epic battles, no recorded disasters, just a gradual fading as rival powers like the Cholas of India and the rising Javanese kingdoms chipped away at their dominance. Climate studies suggest a possible culprit. Rising sea levels may have drowned their vital riverine ports, while silt buildup rendered others useless. The final insult, their own success, planted the seeds of decline. By standardizing maritime trade routes, they made themselves obsolete as middlemen. Today, even local fishermen struggle to point to Srivijaya's remains. The Musi River occasionally coughs up treasures, a gold Buddha, a shard of Tang dynasty porcelain hinting at the wealth that once flowed through these waters. Modern divers have found sunken Srivijayan ships laden with Ming ceramics and Arabian glass, their cargoes frozen in time. The greatest testament to their might isn't in stone or gold, but in geography itself the Malacca Strait remains the world's second busiest shipping lane, still dictating the rhythm of global trade just as it did when Srivijayan sentinels first raised their sails. The Great Wall of China wasn't built for decoration. It was a desperate barrier against an empire of horse-bound warriors who reshaped history without leaving a single permanent city. The Xiongnu didn't just raid China's borders, they extorted its emperors, forcing the Han dynasty to pay humiliating tribute disguised as gifts to avoid annihilation. These nomadic masters of the Eurasian steppe perfected a style of warfare so terrifying that Chinese chroniclers described them as born on horseback, their children learning to shoot arrows before they could walk. But what truly set them apart wasn't just their military prowess, it was a social structure so flexible it made settled empires look rigid by comparison. Burial mounds scattered across Mongolia tell a startling story of gender equality that would have scandalized Confucian scholars. Xiongnu women weren't just caretakers, they were warriors and leaders, interred with bows, swords, and ceremonial headdresses identical to those found in male graves. One spectacular tomb uncovered in the Noin Ula Hills held a high-status woman buried with a chariot, golden ornaments, and a lacquered Chinese cup inscribed with characters calling her a princess. DNA analysis reveals she ate a protein-rich diet similar to male nobles, while her arthritic knees suggest years of riding. This wasn't some exception. About 20% of weapon-bearing Xiongnu graves belonged to women, painting a picture of a society where skill, not sex, determined one's role. The Xiongnu's greatest weapon was psychological. They didn't just attack, they orchestrated chaos. Chinese records described their tactics with palpable dread. Feigned retreats that lured armies into traps, arrows poisoned with fermented milk, and sudden strikes during sandstorms when visibility dropped to zero. Their composite bows, laminated from wood, horn, and sinew, could outrange Chinese crossbows by 100 paces. But their real innovation was logistical. Every Xiongnu warrior traveled with multiple spare horses, allowing them to cover 70 miles a day, a mobility that left infantry-based empires helpless. When the Han dynasty finally defeated them after centuries of war, the truth was murkier. The Xiongnu simply fractured into smaller groups, some absorbed into China, others vanishing westward. This westward migration fuels one of history's most tantalizing theories. Were the Xiongnu the ancestors of Attila's Huns? Linguistic clues hint at connections. The Xiongnu's reported title, Chanyu, sounds uncannily like the Hunnic Khan. Roman accounts describing the Huns' appearance short, broad-faced, with practiced skull deformation match Xiongnu skeletons from Mongolia. The timeline fits too. As the Xiongnu Confederation collapsed in the 1st century, mysterious new riders began pressuring the Goths near the Black Sea 300 years later. While concrete proof remains elusive, the possibility that these steppe nomads terrified both Rome and China offers a humbling reminder of how interconnected ancient Eurasia truly was. What lingers isn't just their military legacy, but their cultural one. The Xiongnu pioneered the model every successful steppe empire would later copy, from the Mongols to the Manchus. Their system of decimal military units, divisions of 10, 100, and 1,000, became Genghis Khan's blueprint. Even their diplomatic playbook, swapping hostages for tribute while maintaining absolute mobility, would be reused for millennia. The Great Wall stands today not as a monument to Chinese isolation, but as silent testimony to the only people who ever made the Middle Kingdom tremble, not by building cities or writing philosophy, but by mastering the art of vanishing into the horizon. Along the bone-dry coast of ancient Peru, the Mach people turned clay into confessionals, their pottery vessels depicting acts so intimate, so boldly human, they'd make a modern artist blush. These weren't just utilitarian jars. They were canvases capturing every facet of life, from warriors clad in jaguar pelts to shockingly explicit sexual acts that modern archaeologists initially mislabeled as fertility rituals. But the real story etched into these ceramics is far darker. A civilization that worshipped blood as fervently as water, where priests in crescent-shaped crowns slit throats to appease gods of the mountains, and where the Pacific Ocean itself may have turned against them in a cataclysmic betrayal. The Moch's erotic pottery reveals a society with radically different boundaries. Vessels molded into intertwined couples, same-sex unions, and even masturbating figures suggest a culture that viewed sexuality as inseparable from spirituality. One infamous fellatio vessel shows a seated man receiving oral sex from a woman, her hands bound behind her back, a scene some scholars interpret as ritual rather than pleasure, possibly symbolizing the transfer of life force. These artifacts weren't hidden away. They've been found in graves, temples, and ordinary homes, hinting that the Moch saw no division between sacred and carnal. But their artistry took a grimmer turn in the Huaca de la Luna, the Pyramid of the Moon. Excavations here uncovered courtyards paved with adobe bricks, each layer stained with the oxidized iron of ancient blood. The walls still bear faded murals of the decapitator god, a spider-like deity holding a crescent knife in one hand and a severed head in the other. Forensic analysis of skeletons found at the site tells a horrifying tale. Victims, often young male warriors, were bled from slits in their throats, their bodies left to bake in the sun before being dismembered. Strikingly, many show healed fractures, suggesting they were captured in ritual battles months before execution, kept alive to serve as living offerings. What doomed this vivid, brutal society? The answer may lie in the sediment cores drilled from nearby lake beds. Around 600 CE, climate data shows a sudden spike in marine deposits, the fingerprint of a super El Niño event. Normally, these warm Pacific currents brought life-giving rains to the desert, but this one was different. Torrential downpours would have washed away mud brick cities in weeks, while ocean warming decimated anchovy schools, the Moch's primary protein source. At the same time, sand dunes began creeping inland, choking irrigation canals. The archaeological record turns apocalyptic. Mass graves filled with malnourished skeletons, hastily abandoned temples, and evidence of civil strife. In their desperation, the Moch may have accelerated their own collapse. As resources dwindled, human sacrifices became more frequent. Excavations show later victims included women and children, a break from earlier warrior-centric rituals. Some scholars believe the priesthood, unable to stop the environmental catastrophe, lost credibility, triggering revolts. Others point to evidence of a final, grotesque solution. Cannibalism marks on bones from this period suggest starvation pushed society to the brink. Yet their legacy persists in the most unexpected ways. Modern Peruvian fishermen still read the ocean's moods using ancestral knowledge passed down from Moch times. Their metalworking techniques, especially gilding and soldering, survived through subsequent cultures. Even their erotic pottery whispers across centuries, challenging modern assumptions about ancient taboos. The Moch remind us that civilizations don't just fade, they sometimes combust under the weight of their own beliefs, leaving behind art that refuses to let us look away. High in the rugged highlands of Ethiopia, a kingdom rose that dared to challenge Rome's grip on world trade. The Empire of Axum didn't just participate in global commerce, they dictated its terms. While Europe languished in the so-called Dark Ages, these African rulers minted their own gold coins bearing portraits of kings with crowns perched at rakish angles, so recognizable that merchants from Alexandria to India accepted them as readily as Roman currency. But their most audacious statement still towers over the landscape: monolithic obelisks carved with false doors and intricate latticework, some reaching over 100 feet tall, each one a declaration that here stood a civilization second to none. What makes these stelae extraordinary isn't just their scale, it's their precision. The largest, now fallen, was a single piece of granite weighing 160 tons, quarried miles away and transported without wheels or pack animals. Modern engineers calculate it would take 6 cranes to lift today, Yet the Axumites not only erected it, they adorned it with precise architectural details, carved windows, beam ends, and even door handles, turning solid rock into a ghostly mirror of their grand palaces. These weren't mere monuments, they were portals between worlds, symbolizing a king's journey to the afterlife while proclaiming Axum's earthly might. Faith transformed Axum twice over. In the 4th century, King Azana made a decision that echoed across continents. He converted to Christianity, decades before Constantine embraced the faith in Rome. The story goes that a Syrian missionary named Frumentius, shipwrecked as a boy and raised in the royal court, eventually baptized the king. But this wasn't passive conversion. The Axumites made Christianity uniquely theirs. Their churches, like the iconic St. Mary of Zion in Axum, blended Byzantine domes with indigenous building techniques, while their crosses incorporated the ancient Ankh symbol, fusing old and new beliefs. Then there's the claim that shakes biblical archaeology to its core, that Axum guards the Ark of the Covenant. Local tradition insists Menelik, son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, brought the sacred chest to Ethiopia. Today, a single monk guards a chapel said to house the Ark, allowing no one but himself to see it. While scholars debate the claim, the psychological power is undeniable. This African kingdom positioned itself not as Christianity's periphery, but as its sacred heart. Axum's decline reads like an economic thriller. As they expanded into Yemen, controlling both sides of the Red Sea's choke point, their wealth seemed unassailable. Then came two silent killers: deforestation from their intensive agriculture and a shift in trade routes as Persian and Arab sailors mastered monsoon winds, bypassing Axum's ports. The final blow, a queen named Judith, remembered in legends as a Jewish warrior woman who burned churches and toppled stelae, possibly in retaliation for Christian persecution of Ethiopia's ancient Jewish community. Whatever the truth, by the 10th century, Axum's golden coins stopped circulating, their obelisks lay toppled, and the world moved on, until archaeologists began piecing together the story of an empire that once made Rome nervous and still claims the most sacred relic in Christendom. Centuries before the Inca engineered their empire-spanning roads, another civilization was already laying highways through the Andes, roads so advanced they still baffle engineers today. The Wari didn't just build pathways, they designed an entire infrastructure system, complete with way stations, suspension bridges, and even gutters to channel torrential mountain rains. Their capital, Huari, wasn't just a city, it was a sprawling metropolis housing over 40,000 people at its peak. A labyrinth of stone walls and subterranean galleries that hummed with activity while Europe was still reeling from the collapse of Rome. Yet despite their mastery of stone and space, the Wari left behind no grand chronicles, no king lists, just silent roads leading to a mystery that archaeologists are still untangling. What set the Wari apart wasn't just their engineering, but their vision of control. Unlike later empires that focused on monuments, they invested in logistics. Their road network, stretching over 1,000 miles, wasn't built for pomp but for precision. Messengers could relay information across the empire in days, while troops could deploy rapidly to quell rebellions. Rest stops called tambos dotted the routes, stocked with provisions and weapon caches, functioning like ancient service stations. But the real genius lay beneath the surface. Their roads were engineered to handle water. In an era when rain could turn dirt paths to mudslides, the Wari paved sections with stone or built raised causeways, while drainage channels prevented erosion. Modern surveys reveal something even more startling. Some routes were deliberately routed to avoid ecologically sensitive areas, suggesting an awareness of environmental impact unheard of in the ancient world. Then there's the enigma of Huari itself. At its height, the city boasted multi-story buildings, reservoirs lined with waterproof plaster, and even a system of terraced agriculture that fed its massive population. But around 800 CE, something went terribly wrong. excavations reveal hastily abandoned workshops, half-finished pottery still on the wheels, tools left mid-task. There's no evidence of invasion, no layers of ash from volcanic eruption. Instead, archaeologists find clues of a slower unraveling, water channels clogged with debris, signs of malnutrition in skeletal remains, and evidence of ritual deposits, ceremonial offerings placed in buildings as if pleading for divine intervention. The leading theory, climate chaos. Ice cores from nearby glaciers show a decades-long drought beginning around 850 CE, coinciding with the city's decline. But this wasn't just a matter of crops failing. The Warriors' entire system relied on predictability. Their roads needed maintenance, their warehouses required steady surpluses, and their authority depended on delivering stability. As the drought persisted, local elites may have abandoned the capital to govern from smaller, more manageable centers until one day, Huari's gates simply never reopen. Yet their legacy is written into the Andes itself. When the Inca rose centuries later, they didn't build their empire from scratch, they inherited Wari blueprints. Many Inca roads follow Wari routes exactly, while their statecraft, from the Mita labor system to the use of quippers for record-keeping, shows unmistakable Wari influence. Even their collapse carries a lesson. The most resilient systems aren't those that resist change, but those that disperse it. The Wari didn't vanish, they fragmented, their knowledge seeping into the cultural DNA of every Andean society that followed, proving that sometimes the end of an empire is just the beginning of its next act. Across the vast grasslands of the Pontic Steppe, a people emerged who would change the course of human history without building a single city or leaving behind grand monuments. The Yamnaya didn't need walls when they had wheels and horses. These nomadic herders of the Eurasian plains perfected a way of life that turned mobility into power, sparking a cultural explosion that reshaped languages, genetics, and societies from Ireland to India. What made them extraordinary wasn't just their mastery of the horse, but how they wove together three revolutionary technologies: animal husbandry, wheeled carts, and metallurgy, into a package so potent it dominated the Bronze Age. The horse was their game changer. While earlier cultures kept horses as livestock, the Yamnaya likely became the first to ride them, transforming these animals from food sources into living engines of conquest. Picture their advantage. A mounted warrior could cover 50 miles a day, herding cattle while scouting for threats, his mobility unmatched by any farmer tied to fields. Their horses weren't the sleek breeds we know today, but sturdy, pony-sized animals whose vertebrae show stress marks consistent with riding. Genetic evidence reveals even more. The Yamnaya selectively bred their herds, favoring traits like endurance and a docile temperament that made them ideal partners rather than just prey. But horses alone didn't build their legacy. It was the combination with wagons that created a Bronze Age superpower. Excavations of Yamnaya burial mounds, called kurgans, reveal the oldest known solid wheeled carts capable of hauling entire households across the steppe. These weren't just vehicles, they were movable homes, allowing families to follow grazing herds while carrying pottery, tools, and even dismantled dwellings. The psychological impact must have been staggering to settled societies. Here was a people who could vanish over the horizon at will, reappearing with reinforcements whenever conflict arose. Their linguistic impact dwarfs even their technological innovations. Nearly half the world's population today speaks languages descended from Proto-Indo-European, the tongue linguists believe the Yamnaya spread. From Sanskrit to Spanish, Celtic to Persian, traces of their vocabulary persist in words for kinship, livestock, and even divine concepts. The word wheel itself shares roots across these languages, suggesting it spread with the technology. How did a nomadic people imprint their speech across continents? The answer lies in their social structure. Unlike agricultural societies where peasants outnumbered elites, the Yamnaya's pastoral lifestyle supported more equal gender ratios, allowing migrating groups to reproduce faster and maintain linguistic continuity. Genetic studies tell the most startling story. When researchers analyzed DNA from ancient European skeletons, they found a dramatic shift. Around 3500 BC, populations from the steppe suddenly appeared as far west as Britain, their genetic markers replacing up to 75% of the local gene pool in some regions. This wasn't gradual blending but a tidal wave, likely fueled by a combination of superior mobility, disease resistance, and possibly violent conquest. The irony, the Yamnaya themselves carried genetic adaptations for digesting milk, a trait they may have picked up from earlier European farmers, then weaponized to thrive in environments where others starved. Their decline is as enigmatic as their rise. By the late Bronze Age, the Yamnaya identity faded, splintering into descendant cultures like the corded ware of Northern Europe and the Sintashta of Central Asia. Yet their blueprint endured. Every later steppe empire, from the Scythians to the Mongols, would echo their horseback ethos. Even today, the highest density of Yamnaya ancestry persists in places like Norway and Scotland, while their linguistic legacy shapes how billions think and speak. They remind us that history's most transformative forces aren't always the ones that build pyramids, but those that teach the world to move. From the cloud-scraping citadels of the Andes to the merchant princes of the Silk Road, these lost civilizations prove genius wears countless faces. Each one excavated from obscurity reveals another way to be human, whether it's the Norte Chico building without war, the Minoans painting dolphins instead of conquests, or the Garamantes coaxing life from desert bones. They challenge our most basic assumptions, that progress requires hierarchy, that survival demands expansion, that history only flows in one direction. Imagine a world where the Hittites' iron treaties became the norm instead of Rome's legions, where the Nox terracotta ambassadors outlasted empires, where the Mocha's vivid artistry shaped centuries instead of being buried by El Niño's wrath. These weren't failed experiments, they were alternate paths flickering for centuries before the winds of change extinguished them. The Yamnaya's horseback horizon stretching, the Olmec's rubber ball cosmology, the Tarim mummy's Eurasian fusion, each whispers that our familiar past is just one timeline among many. What's truly humbling isn't how much we've uncovered, but how much remains hidden. Scholars estimate less than 10% of the Oxus civilization sites have been excavated, while underwater archaeology promises to rewrite Srivijaya's story as new shipwrecks emerge from the Java Sea. Even the Weri's sprawling road network was only identified in the last decade through satellite imagery. Your turn now. Which of these echoes from lost time resonates most? The feminist horse lords of Xiongnu, Axum's audacious obelisks, dive into the comments and tell us which civilization you'd resurrect for a documentary or a time-traveling visit. And if you're craving more stories scrubbed from textbooks, hit subscribe. We're just getting started peeling back history's erased layers. After all, the past isn't a dead thing. It's a mosaic waiting for all its missing pieces to be found.